Most gardeners are still throwing loose wood ash straight onto their beds and calling it, organic potassium. That habit is honestly one of the fastest ways to wreck your soil structure, spike your pH, and burn feeder roots without even realizing it. I've seen beautiful loamy beds turn crusty and lifeless after just 2 seasons of casual ash dumping. The problem isn't really ash itself, the problem is how people apply it. If you're serious about growing food and not just, experimenting on your soil, you need to stop scattering dusty ash and start controlling it. Today I'm breaking down the granulated ash hack that saves your soil without the mess, without the pH shock, and without the nutrient imbalance. And if you're into practical methods that actually improve yields, subscribe to the channel now, because this is the kind of soil level detail we focus on here. So let's talk about why loose ash causes more damage than most people realize. Fresh wood ash is highly alkaline. Depending on the burn material, it can carry a pH between 9 and 13. That means when you broadcast it over a moist bed, especially at more than about 2 to 3 kilograms per 10 square meters in one shot, you are essentially liming aggressively and unevenly. In a small backyard garden, that often translates to people throwing a full bucket across 2 beds in spring. What happens next is, well, pretty predictable. Calcium levels spike, magnesium and potassium ratios shift, iron availability drops, and within weeks you start seeing pale new growth that looks like nitrogen deficiency but isn't. The second issue is physical. Loose ash is ultrafine. The first irrigation or rainfall pushes it into the top centimeter of soil, where it can create a dense, alkaline crust. In heavy clay beds, I've measured reduced infiltration rates within a month of careless ash application. Water runs off instead of soaking in. Seedlings struggle to push through. And because ash is soluble, you also lose nutrients quickly if it's not stabilized. This is where granulation changes everything. When I say granulated ash, I'm talking about binding fine wood ash with a carbon-rich material and a small amount of moisture to create stable granules that release slowly instead of shocking the soil. I've tested this in open field rows, raised beds, and even in adapted mineral feeds for hydroponic systems. The difference in control is, honestly, dramatic. Here's how I do it in real gardens. I start with fully cooled, sifted hardwood ash. No charcoal chunks, no half-burned wood, just pure grey ash. For every 10 kilograms of ash, I mix in about 5 kilograms of finely screened compost or aged leaf mold. That immediately dilutes the alkalinity and adds microbial buffering. Then I add roughly 2 kilograms of biochar that has already been charged in compost tea for at least a week. The biochar acts as a sponge holding onto the soluble potassium and calcium that would otherwise flush away. Once those dry materials are blended thoroughly, I slowly mist the mixture with water while turning it until it holds shape when squeezed but doesn't smear. At that stage, I pass it through a simple hand granulator or even rub it through a 1 centimeter wire mesh screen. The small clumps that form are left to dry under cover for several days. What you end up with is a coarse, crumbly granule that looks more like organic fertilizer pellets than fireplace dust. Why does this work better? Because now the ash is physically locked into a carbon matrix. Instead of dissolving instantly, nutrients release gradually as microbes break down the compost fraction. In raised beds, I've been able to apply up to 1 kilogram of granulated ash blend per square meter over an entire season, without the pH spikes I used to measure with loose ash at half that rate. So, let's talk about actual application in a backyard scenario. In a typical 4 by 8 foot raised bed, which is roughly 3 square meters, I apply about 1.5 to 2 kilograms of granulated ash blend in early spring, before transplanting heavy feeders like tomatoes or brassicas. I incorporate it into the top 10 centimeters of soil along with compost. Then, mid-season, instead of top-dressing pure ash, I side dress another ½ kilogram around fruiting plants, gently working it into the surface and watering deeply. The results? Well, you get stronger stems, improved fruit set, and fewer signs of potassium deficiency in high-demand crops like peppers. More importantly, soil tests taken in autumn show gradual pH shifts instead of abrupt jumps. That stability, honestly, protects microbial life. Earthworm counts in my test beds stayed consistent, which never happened when I used straight ash. Now let's address the hydroponic side because, most people think ash has no place there. You obviously cannot dump ash into a hydroponic reservoir. That's a guaranteed clogging and pH disaster. But you can extract and stabilize its soluble fraction. I've experimented with creating a filtered ash extract by steeping 1 kilogram of fine ash in 20 liters of water for 24 hours, then filtering it through fine cloth and allowing sediments to settle. The clear solution is heavily alkaline and rich in potassium carbonate. On its own, it's too unstable for direct use. But when carefully titrated into compost-based hydroponic teas and buffered with mild organic acids like citric acid, it can serve as a supplemental potassium source during fruiting stages. The key is measurement. I never allow reservoir pH to exceed 6.5 in fruiting systems. In practice, this means adding the extract in 50 milliliter increments per 20-liter reservoir, testing constantly. It's advanced territory, but it proves the principal control matters more than the material itself. Another reason I prefer granulated ash is weed management and, precision. Loose ash drifts, Wind carries it, it coats leaves. Granules, on the other hand, fall exactly where you place them. In row crops, I apply narrow bands about 5 centimeters away from plant stems. That targeted placement really minimizes direct root burn while still feeding the rhizosphere. Over time, I've noticed less moss invasion in pathways as well, because the granules don't create those broad alkaline patches that disrupt surface biology. Let's correct another common piece of advice. Use ash anywhere you need potassium. That's incomplete and, honestly, often wrong. Ash isn't just potassium, it's also calcium carbonate and a wide spectrum of trace minerals. In already alkaline soils, especially those above pH 7.2, adding ash without testing is just careless. In those cases, I either avoid it completely or restrict it to compost piles, where its alkalinity helps balance acidic inputs like fruit waste. In compost, granulated ash works beautifully. Adding 1 to 2 kilograms per cubic meter of compost pile reduces odor, moderates acidity, and enriches the finished product without forming the hydrophobic clumps that loose ash can create when wetted unevenly. There are trade-offs, of course. Granulating ash takes time. It's not a quick toss-and-go solution. But if you're growing food seriously, you already know that soil management isn't about shortcuts. It's about steady, cumulative improvement. Over 3 seasons of using granulated ash blends in my own beds, I've measured better cation balance, improved crumb structure, and fewer nutrient lockout symptoms in sensitive crops like spinach. If your goal is bigger yields without degrading your soil, this method gives you control. You decide the rate. You decide the release speed. You avoid the mess, the pH shock, and the guesswork. Wood ash is a powerful input. Treated casually, it can slowly sabotage your soil. Treated intelligently, stabilized, and applied with restraint, it becomes a strategic mineral supplement that supports long-term fertility. That's what we focus on here. Practical methods that respect soil biology and actually improve food production year after year. If this breakdown helped you rethink how you're using ash, subscribe to the channel and share this video with another grower who still thinks a bucket of fireplace dust is harmless. The more we move toward controlled, experience-tested practices, the better our soil and our harvests will be.